Here.
Yeah. And I was gonna turn you the other way so that your eye wasn't like prominent, but I don't think it will be. I think we'll be fine. That's good.
I don't
Nice
think it's
little
dark
city.
enough. It's gonna get black or what? I don't think it's. That's the blood thinners. I knew that when I did that. That's what's gonna happen.
Okay,
Anyway.
we ready to get started?
Yep.
Okay,
Where are
so-
Where are we at today?
Okay, today we're gonna start talking about people, and I would love to start out with just you giving me, because I know it's one of your favorite people, to hear a little bit about your mom, about Grandma,
Okay.
your maybe just your overall view of her and any interesting stories you want to share about that.
Okay. She was a really wonderful human being. Kind. And someone said something to me once. Fred D. Dominic, who used to own the Villa Marie, remember him? He said to me one day, I think I was at his wife's wake, and he said to me, you know, your mother, she was a wonderful human being. And I said, yeah. I said, my description of my mother was, she was full of grace. She really was. He knew her from the March of Dimes. She was the chairman of the West Cook County March of Dimes for about 15 years. And she and I, basically, because Mother would never go into a tavern. So you get these cans, and I had a little card that said I was from the March of Dimes, and I would go in the tavern and leave these cans, and people would put their change in them.
How old were you at that time?
Probably 10.
Okay, so you were a kid.
Yeah, and then when the drive was over, then we would go, and I would go in and I would get the cans, and we all used to sit in the dining room, Grandpa and Grandma and I and whoever was else around here, and we would cut these cans open and take all the money out of them, and then count the money, you know, separate the nickels and the dimes and the quarters and the dollars and whatever. And then we had to roll them. Remember those rolls? You put the money in it, do all that. And it would take us sometimes 2 evenings. There were, I think, about 200 taverns in Hillside at the time.
Holy cow! So you would put the cans in the taverns, and then you would go and collect it.
Taverns and grocery stores and everything.
And you would collect it once a month?
No, we collected at the end of the drive.
Okay, so it was just for a particular drive. Okay.
Yeah, and then it was a big thing, the March of Dimes. It was a big thing about
Birth defects, right?
yeah, polio.
Oh, right. Okay.
Polio, and the president during the war had polio, Roosevelt. So yeah, and so then we would do that, and then she would tally all this money and take it to the bank and get a certified check. And then she would go downtown to the main office of the March of Dimes, and they would have a luncheon, and she would turn in her proceeds. And she did that for 15 years. But that wasn't the only thing that she did. She used to go to Heinz Hospital every other Thursday. And she knew the guys. These are veterans from World War II who were living their lives out in this hospital. And she could give them cigarettes, shaving cream, shaving lotion, magazines, whatever. And what happened was she got kind of disillusioned with it later in her life because she knew these guys. And all of a sudden, some good people decided that you couldn't give out aftershave anymore because they were drinking it because it had alcohol in it. Who the fuck cares? these
Were they
guys,
not allowed to drink there?
evidently not, but,
Mm.
you know, and then you couldn't give them matches anymore, and then you couldn't, and finally she got to the point where she said, I'm so tired. They're asking me for things that I used to give them and I can't give them to them anymore, you know. And they put her, once she told the story.
But before, wait, she would go every other Thursday just to visit and bring things, and would she collect
Right,
things
well,
from
she
people?
was like, no, she would get this stuff.
She would just bring them stuff that she would
She
have.
could get it from the Veterans Administration. And she would go with her list of what she needed. Pretty soon they weren't gonna give her this, and they weren't gonna give her that.
Okay.
And then at the end, they scared her. They put her in a ward where when she went in, they locked the door, and she was in there with these veterans who were,
Mhm.
and they were like playing imaginary ping pong across the aisle. Scared her. And that coupled with the fact, and she did this for years. She did it for like, I don't know how many years.
Was that the story you were going to tell, or you said you had a story and I interrupted you?
Just that was what I was going to tell you. They put her in this ward with these guys who were mentally not balanced, and they were playing imaginary ping pong, and it scared her.
She was like, okay, this is getting a
This
little
is enough.
out of hand.
This is enough, yeah. Because a lot of the guys then, you know, had died over the years, you know, so at any rate, so I mean, those are the kind of things that she did. And my dad was a precinct captain, and she worked judge of elections. You know, those are terrible things. Those presidential elections are terrible because you've got these big, long green ballots of judges. Why do we vote for judges? We don't know anything about judges, you know. And they were paper ballots, and you had to count them.
Jesus.
And yeah, and you know, and you're getting tired. It's, you know, you've been there since 5:30 in the morning, and now it's 11 o'clock at night, and you're trying to. If you could just get two people to count the same thing and come up with the same number,
Mm-hmm.
but it never worked out that way. We're always, I'll do it again, you know. And then,
election judge, so it'll be interesting. It's all so digital now. I'm going to be an election judge.
Oh, okay, yeah.
But which precinct? I mean, I forget. They were Democrats, Republicans. What was their deal?
Grandpa was the Republican precinct captain, but I think he was the Republican precinct captain because nobody else wanted the job.
Okay, so he was just.
I don't know what he was. I really don't know what he was, a Democrat, because I don't know. But that was a big responsibility, and I remember this, you know. He died the night that Jack Kennedy was elected president. And I had come home, I had been to a wake, and I can't even remember whose father
The very
died.
night that he got elected?
Yeah, this is an interesting aside there. Up at 5144 Warren Avenue, there was a house. Their name is Sismesha. Earl is still alive. I think he's about 93. I haven't seen him in a long time, but I used to see him at Mass every Sunday. Because his father, whose name was Julius Sismesha, died the morning of the election. So when people went to vote, they found out that Julius had died. Well, I came home that night. I had been to this wake up in Evanston, and as I said, I don't remember whose father it was, but I saw my dad like around 5 o'clock. I was getting ready to go to the wake, and I look back at it now, and he didn't look good, you know, because he was dark complected. He looked like a little ashy, you know. So I said to him, "Can I make you something to eat before I go?" And he said, no. He said, it's been a long day. He said, and I want to get up there. We voted in the Presbyterian Church on Taft Avenue. And he said, it's been a long day, and Mother is really tired, he said, and so I want to go up there and get these results and get them over to Maywood, which is where they had to go. He said, and then we want to come home. We're both tired. So I got home like around 9:30, and you know, my mother, She was of that generation that wore girdles or corsets with stockings with hooks on the middle. And whenever she got stressed, she did dishes. She'd take the dishes out of the cupboard and stand there and rewash them because it was busy, kept her busy. And I came in and she said to me, "We think Dad's had a heart attack. Ray is here." And she said, "I want you to go with him in the ambulance." And I said, "Well, how am I going to get home?" And she said, "Dorothy will bring your car."
So you got here just after this had all happened.
Yeah, this was like around 9 o'clock at night. He was home from doing the precinct
So he had
captain.
gone back and he did all of his
duties, right? And then he came home, and so I went with him in the ambulance, and we went to Elmhurst Hospital, and they did not have a room for him. The hospital was for some reason crowded, so he was in a bed in the hall. Now my dad was a great kidder, great sense of humor, and so he's kibitzing with the nurses, and he called me, and I went over to the bed, and he said, "Take your mother home. I'm going to be fine. She's very tired." So I was like midnight now. So I said to her, "He wants you to go home." And she didn't want to. But you know, I don't know if you ever knew this about him. He was a certified first aid teacher during the war. He taught classes all around the area. And he made splints and stuff. How to set a broken leg, how to set a broken arm, how to put on tourniquets, how to stop bleeding. Because there was this big freight yard over here. Remember when Mannheim Road Bridge is there? That was a big freight yard. And that was one of the worries about the war, was that if we were attacked in this country, that's what they attacked. They attacked, your transportation, So I remember a story, the Servites, where the village hall is now, that was a monastery. It was for high school kids. And they all wore habits. So that was an air raid shelter, that monastery. So he went over there to teach them first aid. And Grandma told me this story. She said he went in, and they all were there, the kids. And he said to them, "We're not doing anything if you're going to be wearing those dresses, because you got to get on your hands and knees." And they went, "Hooray!" They went running back. They all came in with Levi's and whatever on, they were so happy. And Barbara Brose was living in Wausau, Wisconsin. This is a long time later. And she went in her doctor's office, and there on the wall in a frame was Grandpa's first aid card that he had signed, that this guy had completed the course. And this guy was so proud that he had it. And I remember old Servite priests here, they'd say, "I knew your dad." And then they opened up their wallet and they got their, from the 1940s, they got their first aid card, And so he did all that.
So he really knew about that.
Yeah, he really did. And the other thing was, this is my own thought, he knew he was going to die. He knew what was going on. Yeah, you don't die from this anymore, but he got a thrombosis, which is like a blood clot in the valve of his heart. And then he got a second one, which completely blocked it, and then it killed him. He didn't want her to be there, because it's not a very nice way to die, because your brain kind of blows up, there's no oxygen there. And so he knew, I think, that that's what was going to happen. He just wanted her to be gone. I know that I've told this to you before. My parents were really in love with each other. They met on Friday and got married on Monday, and he shipped out and she did not see him for 18 months. And, you know, Vic said to me one day at lunchtime, after Joan died, he went to the cemetery and he would always say this, well, I took the leaves off your headstone, whatever, and I'd say, that's nice, but I don't really care. And he said to me, I can't find Catherine. Catherine was Joan's mother, and she was buried right near the Osborne family plot. And actually where she's buried it's Grandpa, Grandma, Jeannie, George, Anita, Connie, and Bud. And Catherine is buried right at Bud's feet. And so Vic said to me, I didn't know that mother was a widow for 22 years. I said, she was a young woman when he died. And she used to say, selling that property over there to Dorothy, the 20 most unhappy years of her life. They made her life miserable. They always wanted something, you know, they wanted something. And Ray, funny I call him Ray, but I couldn't do that when he was alive. He wanted to put a gate on the other side of the swimming pool. And he came here and he asked.
So they could get to it from their house?
Yeah. And Grandma said, no, that is on my property. There's gonna be one gate and one key.
She got tired of having to respond to
Yeah,
them.
and she said, and it's gonna be on my side, and the key is gonna be in this house. And if you wanna go swimming, you have to come in here and get the key. He did not like that because he liked to be in charge of everything, you know. But at any rate, those are those terrible stories.
So, but getting back before we wrap up this session, Grandma was at the hospital with Grandpa. You think Grandpa feels like he knew he was dying, but you know that he told her.
Told me to take her.
He'd said she was tired earlier in the evening before he even went to the.
And the thing was, when we got home, I dropped her in front of the house, and then I put the car in the garage. And in those days, we only had one telephone, and it was on a desk in the dining room. And as I came through the dining room, the phone rang. I picked it up, and it was Dorothy, and she said, bring Mother and come back now.
You had just gotten home.
I just got home. Then it's only 3 miles from there to here,
Right.
yeah, he died as soon as we left. He got another one. And her doctor, his name was Dwyer, and he used to say to her, if we knew today what we knew then, Leo would still be here. Because she wanted them to have an autopsy. She wanted to know why he died. She said, I heard her say, she said, Leo, if you could learn anything from performing an autopsy on Leo, he'd like that. And so that's what they said it was, he was perfectly healthy. He had nothing wrong with him.
So she said, do an autopsy because he would want that?
He would want that. If you could learn, because they didn't know why he died. If you could learn something from performing an autopsy on him that would help somebody else, he'd like that.
Mm-hmm.
So it was just my own thought. I think that he knew that, you know, he was not going to make it out of this thing. And you know, he was only 68 years old. He was young. So
Grandma was what?
A widow.
Like what? She in her 60s also.
Yeah, she was. He was 68, so she was 64. He was born in 1894, and she was born in 1897. Long time ago. Yeah, and it makes me tear up to think of all these stories. But I remember once.
Well, we should end this one and then we'll keep going talking about Grandma and Grandpa in the next session.
All right.
Okay, so just give a little minute so that I can know when I'm reading it back that we're on the next one.
Yeah.